President Lubbers, thank you very much for joining us today for your oral history on your role and Grand Valley's role in charter school leadership in Michigan. So appreciate your time today.
Well, you're welcome. I hope my memory is good. I'm going to claim that it is.
I'm sure it's great. So first, as we start off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your position was when Michigan's charter law was being developed?
Well, I came to Grand Valley in January 1969 and was president of Grand Valley when the issue of charter schools came up, and I always liked the idea of charter schools.
Yeah. How did you first get involved in charters and chartering?
Well, let's go back to some of my observations and what I believed. Looking at higher education in Michigan, the universities have always competed, and they have at times come together and cooperated. It's not been a smooth relationship amongst all the universities all of the time, but it's a pretty good relationship. Compared to the competition in some other professions, I think it's pretty civil. But my observation was that the universities in Michigan were free of a overriding bureaucracy. Therefore, they were independent, and they did compete with one another. And the universities, I thought at the time, were generally pretty good quality. And some were called colleges then and not universities. And then surveying the public school system and looking at some of the difficulties in some of the districts and look at the test scores in some of the districts. Some of the districts are fine, some were not. I came to the conclusion that little competition in education is not a bad idea. And our public school system was not designed initially for competition. That didn't seem necessary. But it appeared to me that maybe some competition would be a good idea. And certainly there was a need for some reform in K through 12 education.
So who first introduced you to the idea of charter schools?
Well, I think Governor Engler certainly brought my consciousness of public schools forward. When he was proposing charter schools, and my idea of, well, how are we going to get an improvement in K through 12 and competition a factor, I did think charter schools could add some competition, which might be very good for the traditional public schools. So I would say that's what made me conscious of it and made me favorable toward it. Then once the law was passed, and I didn't know much about it, Central Michigan University, where Engler had hailed from that part of Michigan, and I think he used that university to lead in the charter school movement. But Grand Valley came in second, I think, in terms of showing interest and doing something about it. I remember quite distinctly when some Holland, Michigan parents wanted a high school, and that's now Black River High School. That may have been the first school we ever chartered. I'm not sure.
I think,
but it might be. And they came and talked to me and asked whether Grand Valley would charter that school. Well, our relationships in Holland were very close.
Mm-hmm.
We were a natural to do that if we were going to do it. So that visit with a person from Holland and then other people from Holland really made me think about, well, are we going to do this or aren't we going to do this? And my final conclusion was, we'll go with it. And once I had thought we should do it, and I wanted to do it because, as I explained, why I supported the idea of charter schools. Here was a real charter school that was proposed. And so then all the theory had to, be put aside and decide whether we're going to actually do that job. And I went to the board. I don't remember quite how that approach took place, but I was pleased that 100%, or all 8 board members, supported the idea.
Really?
They thought it was a good idea.
Were you worried about, who was the board chair at the time, and did you have any concern?
I think probably it was either Paul Johnson or Bill Seidman.
Okay.
I'm not sure who.
Okay.
But they all thought, yeah, that's a good idea. I explained why I thought it was a good idea. They said, we'll go along with that. And so we did. We chartered it. We started it.
Yeah.
And went from there.
Yeah. So you've seen, during your tenure as president, you were with charters, or the university was in the charter movement during the rocky early years.
It was definitely rocky early years. And of course there were caps on the number of charter schools that one could have. One of the decisions that we made early was to really have, if not a supervisory, I mean, because each charter school had its own board, the university and its charter office almost acted as the superintendent. I mean, the principal ran it, but we really did not disassociate ourselves and say, well, okay, principal and board, you run it. They did, but we wanted a part of it, of the action. We wanted to see that it was done well. And so we decided right away that if the standards were not met, we would suspend the charter. We'd decertify it and not have a school. So we were not ready to just keep chartering as many as we could and let it go. We had standards, which I am really pleased have been maintained to this day. You don't get a charter school from Grand Valley and then figure, okay, now we're free to go any way we want to go. No, you have responsibilities and standards to meet. And Grand Valley sees that they're done. Now this is a side, I'm digressing a bit, but I have been noticing some of the national reaction to charter schools and concentrating on Detroit. And I think there were articles in the New York Times, and I think I read that. Not particularly favorable. Now they're fed by the Washington K-12 establishment, which has a lot of teachers union input. They did not do their thorough research job on what's going on in Detroit. Some of it may be not so good, but some of it is excellent. And Grand Valley is doing a very good job. So the battle is still there. I mean, the anti-charter school people did, to I think, an unusual degree, influence what the national media is has been talking about, and they're not getting it 100% right.
So on that pushback, on that battle, did you have any resistance from the school districts that might hire GVSU teachers?
Yes, certainly there was a fear and a pushback. I would meet with the superintendents of the districts around us where we charter school,
Okay.
and even where we didn't, and invite them to a luncheon. And
Okay.
we'd talk about these issues, what their problems were, and how the charter schools were affecting them. I made a deal, not a signed contract,
Yeah.
but I made a deal. We will not charter more than one kind of school, that is high school, middle school, elementary school. We will not charter more than one in your district.
Okay.
Because again, I said, I just want to see what the competition does. What do you do? How do you react to it? How do the people in your district react to it? And is it a good charter school, or isn't it a good charter? I wanted to see that.
Yeah.
But I did not want to have Grand Valley be in total competition
Yeah.
with the public school. I believe in the traditional public school district.
Yeah.
And so that was a deal I made, and that was pretty good, because I think probably I met with them over a 3-year period, once a year or something,
Okay.
maybe a 4-year period. And they could express their feelings, and I could explain what we're going to do. But I think that deal, that we were not just going out to charter wholesale, but we would only put one of each kind of school in your district if it's requested, and if we think it's a good idea. So that was one pushback that I handled in that way. The second, of course, was from our own School of Education faculty.
Sure.
And you know, that got to be a deep entrenchment. And some of the schools, the teachers union, I suppose it would be, they started threatening that they wouldn't take our student teachers. Well, that is a pretty, I didn't think that would probably, I don't know whether that'd be illegal or not. I have no idea, but it strikes me as illegal.
Yeah.
So we had to work through that, and our faculty, of course, and those who opposed it. Our faculty, I'm sure, were divided in it, but there was enough resistance. And you know, I finally said, we're chartering schools.
Yeah.
That's it.
And
It's going to be done. So you can either, I mean, I can't tell you or make you favor charter schools. If you don't favor them, you don't favor them. But you cannot undermine this program. This is not, you know, you're part of this university, and our Board of Control has voted to support charter schools. So I'm not going to try to argue with you or persuade you even, but this is what your university that employs you is doing.
Sure.
And so in the long run, it worked out. I don't know what the situation is now. I don't think, you know more than I do about that. Yeah. But it finally worked out, and some of the faculty found that they could work with charter schools and have student teachers in them, and that threat in some of the traditional public schools dissipated.
Sure.
And that I don't think is any longer a problem, or that was a short-lived problem. Yeah. So those were the difficulties that we had, and that we worked through. Of course, well, the proof is always in the pudding. So why do we have charter schools? Huh? Yeah. Why do we have charter schools? because many parents wanted an option
Yeah.
for their children. And of course, then the law was passed. I think it was after charter schools, wasn't it? The law to have students from one district be able to move to another district.
Yep, they were right about the same time.
Were they right about the same
Yeah.
time? And that helped parents too. And I don't know today in the city of Grand Rapids what's happening, but when I see the kinds of innovative things that are going on in the public school system in Grand Rapids, I think now that is the way a traditional public school in a situation that's not easy for educating children
Yeah.
is doing a good job. And I predict there are going to be times, and maybe it's happening now, where people will come from other districts into the Grand Rapids district because they are proving that things can be done right.
Yeah.
And there are charter schools.
Well, one of them is the William C. Abney Academy,
Yeah,
which Grand
right,
Valley
Grand
chartered.
Valley. So
back in
Grand
98.
Rapids has the charter school issue, and yet they have not. They don't spend all their time fighting it. They actually support and use the charter
Yeah.
school.
So were there ever any points in your presidency where you had thought that maybe charters were the wrong direction? I know that
Oh, never.
there was
No,
the constitutional challenge in the late 90s.
No, I never thought it was the right thing to do, and I think it's helping. I think it helped in Grand Rapids. I think it helped in Holland. I think it's making a big difference in Detroit.
Yeah, it is.
I think I don't know how many students there are in Detroit in charter high schools.
It's a growing number. I know in Grand Valley chartered schools in the Metro Detroit area, we educate about 20,000 students within the city.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That is huge. And so the Detroit Teachers Union, they don't like that, do they?
It's a little bit of a bumpy relationship in some instances.
I'd say a very bumpy relationship. Now, who's to blame? You know, what is the problem there? Just a lot of people were not satisfied with what the traditional educational system was providing.
Yeah.
And I'm not up on what the real issues were there, but I just know that students were not being educated the way their parents wanted them to be, and so now we've got, you say in our own Grand Valley, 20,000 students. That shows to me that the Detroit public school system, and I hope they are, better start reforming themselves. Or reforming, at least, if not reforming, doing things that make for better education, like the Grand Rapids school system is doing.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about how you and GVSU worked with school districts. Could you talk a little bit about how you worked with other universities who were also in the charter space?
Well, I'm not aware of any of the difficulties. When we were chartering, and when I was there as president, Central Michigan had the largest number. We had the second largest number, and many of the universities didn't charter schools. I mean, their education faculty, I'm sure, maybe prevailed in that, and maybe their presidents and their boards felt that way. And were anti-charter. So it was a pretty limited club.
Yeah.
While I was there, there just weren't very many, and I can't I don't know of any traditional public school systems at that time chartered any. You have a question, or I can keep
No, go
on
ahead,
talking
please.
about? Another thing I thought about the charter school system, or the charter schools, I not only thought they would be good competition, but I thought that that law might permit traditional public school systems and universities to work together, charter some schools together to see what worked, and bringing the School of Education faculties and the public school teachers together. Early on, the superintendent of the Grand Rapids Public Schools and I talked it over, and we decided to charter a public school together.
Okay.
This was Grand Rapids Public School System in Grand Valley. We would charter a school together. And we brought people from the public school system and the university together, and it was planned and ready to go, and he backed out.
So
I mean, we were really quite enthusiastic about it, and then he said, no, we're not going to do it.
So why did he back out?
He never told me.
Okay.
He just backed out. And soon after, he went to another school district. I think he got too much heat from
Sure.
from his teachers, and I think maybe from his board. I don't know, but I thought, what a wonderful opportunity in Michigan this is for universities and public schools to put schools together in the districts that would do things a little differently and see whether they worked. And what worked, great.
Yeah.
And what didn't, discontinue it. But it would be public school district teachers within public school districts having opportunities to do something a little bit differently, and working with the university a little more closely, and bring these two educational groups together. That kind of fertilization, I think, often works and creates things. But that has not been the case, and I've often thought, you know, the teachers' unions fight that. They could have union teachers in charter schools. The public school system, if they have a teachers' union and they're by law required to do collective bargaining, they can do that in charter schools too.
Yep, absolutely.
They never saw that opportunity. That has always bothered me. I've never understood why, if you're organized collectively to make life better for teachers, more income and a better working conditions, why wouldn't you support an opportunity for teachers to do some creative things and try some things in a situation which required some change?
Yeah.
I never understood that.
So now that we're a few years out from the major battles and charters are more accepted, do you think a joint university district charter might be a viable idea now?
I wonder. Well, I'll tell you, if the Detroit school system had been willing to do charters, wasn't it Mr. and Mrs. Thompson who offered something like $200 million
That's right.
to the Detroit public school system to reform their high schools?
Yep, that's right.
And they turned it down? I mean, they had their reasons. I am not aware of their reasons. It seems to me unreasonable. It seems to me people were more concerned about having their control than they were to make that control work in the interest of students. if someone comes in and offers you $200 million right out of the blue, and there's that out of the tax base, and shoo,
Yeah.
that just blew my mind.
Yeah.
So this entrenched resistance is still there. And even in discussions amongst my friends, if the charter school issue comes up, and they're all, yeah, but they're not public schools. And I say, yes, they are public schools. So that kind of misperception is still rampant. You
Yeah.
know? And that's what the charter school group has not been able to communicate very well, that this is a public school. Just like any other public school in terms of funding. I mean, it gets funded by the state per
The same
pupil
way
basis.
per pupil.
And then I say, and charter schools are not, they're not selective. They may be selective only in a way that only the parents who want a better education for their children, and that's a group. Is that selective? I wouldn't call that selective. But it's all by lot.
Yeah.
I mean, charter schools have to, if they've got 200 places and 400 applicants, you pick the names out of the hat. And so it's not selective.
So as we're coming up this year, we're entering into the 25th anniversary of charter schools in Michigan. Just looking back over the last 25 years, what has been the most rewarding aspects for you personally about your and Grand Valley's involvement in charters?
Well, Grand Valley's charters, the students generally do better. Their education progresses better than in other kinds of schools. And I think that's a proven fact. I mean, you have to look. Now, the critics will say, well, you get better students coming in. Well, maybe, maybe not. I think one of the things that the public schools, traditional public schools, by not using the charter school law, they may have not an argument, but a fact that, well, sure, the ones who have a better background for learning are in these charter schools, and we have to take care of the rest. Well, yeah, you do. Then you better learn how to take care of the rest. You better start experimenting. Maybe you ought to start some charter schools with different rules. That's. I know I'm sorry, but if they had used the charter school law, in my estimation, the way it could have been used, we would have new kinds of school systems in these very difficult districts that would be doing a better job, like the Grand Rapids school system is.
A final question for you today. Looking back over the last 25 years, would you do it all again?
Oh, of course. I think the charter school movement has been exceedingly useful in the education of children, but we've got a long way to go, because the charter schools are not going to take over K through 12 education. The traditional public schools are going to have far more students. We must devote attention and provide the resources for the traditional public schools to become better. But that's why I like to use Grand Rapids, in my estimation, as a pretty good example of how you can begin that process in a large urban district. And so I think the charter schools are doing what they're supposed to do. And if the charterers, like the universities and the community colleges, make sure that the bad ones are eliminated, I think the movement will continue to flourish.
Great. President Lubbers, we appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.
much.